Hello and welcome to Buildings of Tomorrow. My name is Jon Lester and today I'm joined by Elisa Rönkä, the Head of Smart Office in the region Europe for Siemens Smart Infrastructure. And today we are talking about flexibility in the workspace of the future. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So the future workplace, the modern office, when we talk about flexibility, what do we refer to in this aspect?
So I think flexibility is really one of these really interesting topics because there are so many different ways we can look at flexibility. So first of all, the spaces need to be flexible. We know that there will be much more remote working or project-based working, and that means that you need to maybe contract or expand your spaces from a, let's say, volume perspective due to the nature of business. On the other hand, you might have to, let's say, reconfigure your spaces based on the different types of work that people are doing or the preferences that the human sensor is telling you what works, what doesn't work with the individuals. So it has to do with the, let's say, the physical flexibility. But what's really juicy is then that what you actually do in terms of culture, the kind of how do you drive agility in the workplace? So it's one thing reconfiguring the spaces from a volume or a fit out perspective continuously, but how do you actually drive up, for example, space utilization, if that's a topic for you, or drive down? That could also be another topic. And that's where it becomes really, really juicy. How do you kind of make sure that you drive behavior the right way?
Yeah, right. So it's not just providing a space which people can pick and choose how they use it and maybe saying, hello, project, for the next 3 months, you sit here or whatever it might be. It's also trying to drive the required behavior so you can achieve those goals, because you can't just tell people to work flexibly and expect them to change everything completely. How would we go about something like that?
So that's really interesting because I think usually everyone goes to analytics, and analytics are important. That gives you the snapshot, the status quo of where do we stand at the moment? How do people use the spaces? How much are they used? How do they engage with the spaces? But I always like to challenge customers with this question that then what? What do you do with that information? You get a nice dashboard, for example, but that doesn't change any of the pain points that you might have. So how do you actually reach that next level? For example, utilization being a great example. How do you make sure that you actually drive utilization up? And that then requires to have means for the people to be able to find the spaces better so they can be more agile, so they don't waste time trying to find that vacant meeting room or trying to find a good work spot that is along their lines of preference. So really having this kind of end user interface that works together with the analytics and make sure that the KPIs are being driven up, that's crucial. And it's easier said than done in a way. It's one thing to dump technology and expect everything to work fantastically afterwards, but it's actually a change management process for people. And that's where you need to take that, let's say, human factor very much into consideration.
Yeah, because that's, again, a very different step, because analytics within, let's call it operation, or when we're focusing on energy efficiency or something, it's the same concept. The analytics is that first step. It gives you the insight and the snapshot, but you have to turn that into actions to use it effectively. It's just a little more difficult to turn it into actions when we're talking about people and the way they spend their time and how they go about their daily work. So that change management is a really interesting part. And how, we mentioned technology there and how you can't just throw technology at it, but I assume that you must need some kind of technology to help create this interaction, to create this connection.
For sure. So first of all, I think from an infrastructure perspective, because, building life cycles are long, you need to make sure that you have, let's say, flexible technology or operating technology in the building that allows you to do, for example, the physical fit outs or whatever is needed. That already isn't always a given, especially in older buildings. So I think for, any newer buildings, that needs to become a standard. Otherwise, you will run into trouble later on in the journey. But then once that, let's say, the infrastructure piece is in place, then it's about the digital means. So really having the analytics in place and feeding the data from different data sources. Those could be part of the building operating technology already, or then additional sensors in order to gather that meaningful data that you need. And then you need an end user interface. Currently, as the world stands, it's usually via a mobile app. So something that users always carry with them, that they're able to then, let's say, get that transparency of the data real time for them so they can do whatever they need to do in the spaces better. Usually it's about finding people, finding spaces that creates the agility and reduces the friction.
And that's one of the important parts, isn't it? Because that last word that you used, friction, is also something we have to be a little bit careful about, right? Because we know that whether it's a normal program we use on our laptop or an app that we find in our smartphone, it has to give value without adding friction to our daily life, or we just don't like getting involved.
And there are so many friction points in the workday that we just have gotten so used to that we don't even kind of criticize it and to try to necessarily reduce. We are used to scrambling to find, for example, a vacant space, and everyone is frustrated about it. And it's a huge dip in productivity because it's time lost, but it's also really a dissatisfaction.
Walk around in circles all the time.
All the time. I call it office gymnastics because you try to, look up and above, these meeting room windows. Is there someone there? Can I take that room? And even though, it's good to practice a bit of gymnastics each day, right? But, in essence, there are more efficient ways to actually find what you need. And these friction points we just need to get rid of. That's absolute waste that we just need to get rid of to actually drive value.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot just to finish off this topic. Could you give me a bit of a use case, a bit of an example where this kind of thing has been achieved? An anonymous idea of how a company's taken a requirement and through this interaction we've been able to achieve their ultimate goals.
Yeah, so we have some big global corporations that have kind of looked at it from this holistic point of view. So they've first deployed the technology that's needed to get the analytics in place on how people use the spaces. And then they've deployed an application, mobile app on top to really drive this behavior. We've seen statistics like 25% productivity increase of employees and increase in space utilization of 20 to 30% globally on their global portfolio. So these are impressive statistics that you can really achieve. And if you really start quantifying that into monetary figures, especially the productivity part, it becomes extremely lucrative.
I think that, exactly as you mentioned, that's the capability for us to quantify, because it's not something that we can collect as a data point, is a challenge. But at the same time, when you're talking about these kind of numbers, even if there's a little bit of give and take within that, it's a huge impact that I think is benefit in both areas. And I think that's one of the points that I hear a lot is that, okay, from a business perspective, that's great to have a rise in productivity, but that also has a personal positive reaction. Because for me, if I go to work and I feel like I get a lot done, I walk out of there with a smile on my face. That sense of achievement is a huge aspect to this additional value.
And that's so true. And I think productivity is sometimes very much misunderstood as a term because it's somehow seen as, employees being the machine that, do the profit for the organization. Of course, that's one dimension to it. But actually, based on research, employees want to be productive. Productivity is really a very satisfying feeling. And it's really part of the, let's say, employee satisfaction and personal well-being as well. As you said, this feeling of accomplishment. And we should not look at it just from a traditional, negative viewpoint, because I think if we start looking at it from this individual positive factor viewpoint, we actually end up driving it in the right way. If we aim at the satisfaction and feeling of accomplishment of individuals, the business results will come as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of quotes from many business leaders when people talk about culture, eating strategy for breakfast, and all these kinds of things. If we focus on that culture and you focus on the personal impact, then you have the opportunity to drag all of these other more business-focused KPIs with it.
Exactly. So people first, also when it comes to workplace technology, also when it comes to infrastructure flexibility, think about people first and the use cases that you want to drive with these individuals, and then you end up reaping the benefits in the long run.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jon.
And thank you all for joining us here on Buildings of Tomorrow. Please feel free to share, comment on this episode, subscribe to us on all your favorite podcast channels. You can also find some of these videos on YouTube, and join us again soon. Thank you.